Hey, welcome back to Anti-Social Studies. Today, we're starting content. We're starting the stuff that's going to show up on the AP exam. So hopefully you've already watched my Welcome to WHAP video and you've already watched my Unit 0 overview. That one's a lot longer than these videos are going to be because trying to cover 10,000 years in 20 minutes. But today, we're going to start talking about Unit 1, the Global Tapestry. What does the Global Tapestry mean? I don't know. This unit's super awkward. Just prepare yourselves emotionally and mentally for the fact that this unit's really awkward. It's not a traditional history unit because there's not really a narrative. There's not really this broad chronology. Essentially, what we're doing in Unit 1 is we're just like hopping into the year 1200 and looking around and seeing who's there. It's sort of like, I call it my roll call unit. So imagine that we're Bill and Ted in our time traveling phone booth. We get dropped into the year 1200. We're basically just hopping around going, hey, what's happening in East Asia? Cool. What's going on in the Middle East? Great. What's happening in Africa? So on and so forth. So the good news here is that dates aren't super important for this unit because really it's like you're just looking at things that are all happening at around the same time-ish, give or take a few hundred years. The only time chronology or dates are going to matter is if like one civilization gets conquered by another. Well, then obviously you need to know that they're not existing at the same time. Spoiler alert, I'm really just talking about the Mongols, right? The Mongols sort of come towards the end of this time period and just conquer a lot of these places. So let's look at a map and just kind of visualize like what are the main civilizations that you're probably going to read about or learn about. Some of these you've heard of, a lot of them you probably haven't. I'm not going to go in depth on all of these, but I do just want to like point out a few things that you might want to notice. So let me pull out my pen and you're going to notice two different things happening. I'll make green for kind of traditional land-based empires. So like in 1.1, right, you're going to look into East Asia and you're going to learn about the Song dynasty, which is a big kind of traditional Chinese dynasty. Then you're going to hop over and you're going to look at a thing called Dar al-Islam, which basically means the House of Islam. It's kind of the entire Islamic world. It sort of includes the Delhi Sultanate. The Abbasid are kind of the main power within there, all the way up to Muslim Spain. And so you're going to see this Dar al-Islam, which basically means all these different civilizations that kind of are connected by the religion of Islam and are all kind of located in what we now think of as the cultural Middle East. Again, the Abbasid is the main one. They kind of do a lot of the spreading of Islamic culture. But you're also going to read about others within the Abbasid Empire, because basically by the 1200s, the Abbasid and the Song dynasty are both kind of fallen apart. And so you might get a little confused because you'll read about the Abbasids, but then you'll also read about these people called like the Mamluks in Egypt or the Turks that are coming into the Middle East. And you're like, wait, what's happening? It's all happening at the same time. Basically, we're hopping into the Middle East when this massive golden age empire is in its decline. And so we're seeing it sort of breaking apart. You're also going to hop over and you're going to notice other kind of land-based kingdoms like the Aztecs in modern day Mexico, the Inca that have this massive empire that's like bigger than the Roman Empire was, all throughout the Andes. But another thing you're also going to notice is the rise of these new types of kingdoms and states that are centered on trade, specifically the Indian Ocean. The Indian Ocean trade is like the most important trade route for the vast majority of history. And so what you're going to notice is these kind of city-states popping up along what we call the Swahili coast in East Africa. You're going to notice a lot of smaller Southeast Asian kingdoms that dominate one or a few islands. Malacca is like just a tiny little city-state that like dominates this Strait of Malacca. Srivijaya is another one. The Majapahit at their height control like 98 other tributary cities. But basically what's unique about a lot of these kingdoms is that they don't quite produce, they're not traditional kingdoms or empires. They don't really produce as much stuff. Yeah, they like produce spices and that sort of thing. But for the most part, these states gain and maintain their power by controlling trade, right? So if you're these Swahili coast city-states, you're controlling the trade of like gold and salt kind of out to the Indian Ocean. If you're one of these Southeast Asian kingdoms, you're kind of controlling access to China, really. And so this is something where a lot of these states might be ones you've never heard of before. You do kind of need to understand some of these are like Buddhist kingdoms, some of them are Hindu. There's a lot of cultural differences. But if we're really going to oversimplify, you basically have the green, which are kind of more traditional land-based empires or kingdoms. But then you have these new, smaller kingdoms or city-states. Again, they're not united. They're just kind of dotting the coasts that are rising up and taking advantage of the growing trade routes across the Indian Ocean. Meanwhile, let me get my I don't even have like a brown. I guess I'll do like a red. Meanwhile, Europe is in its Middle Ages, right? Europe is still kind of struggling to come out of their Middle Ages. We're hopping into this time period kind of in the middle of the Crusades. We're hopping in right when England is kind of starting to decide that some noble people have rights in the Magna Carta. But the point is, the main theme of Unit 1 and this time period in general is that African, Asian, and American states are crushing it. They are dominating the world, right? Everyone is looking to the Islamic world and the Chinese world to figure out like what's the height of civilization. Baghdad and Hangzhou, one of the main cities in the Song Dynasty, are like the New York and London of the late post-classical era. And so really the only thing we really need to think about with England is how they are juxtaposed or different from the rest of these empires and kingdoms. They're still really struggling to be united. They're struggling to kind of gain any sort of foothold in this powerful Asian African world. Foreshadowing, right, for when they're going to start like sailing places to figure out how they can compete. Okay. So really there's one guiding question. As you're going through your class, as you're reading your textbook, you really just want to make sure that if nothing else, you can answer this question in a lot of detail. How did states gain and maintain power? Or how did they attempt to? That doesn't mean they were always successful, right? And so these are questions you're going to have to answer. I can't go into all this detail for you right now, but in general, you're going to want to think about how did states use belief systems to gain legitimacy. So when you're reading and you see the textbook or your teacher talking about a state religion, you'd want to take note of that. For example, in the Aztecs and the Inca, to a lesser extent, we see human sacrifice being used as a tool for political control, and that's also linked to their religious beliefs. We're gonna see some states that put their religion, it's an outside religion, on top of the native religion. This middle picture is the Qutub Minar, and I'm sorry if I'm saying that wrong, in the Delhi Sultanate, right? Because the Delhi Sultanate is going to be Muslims invading India and taking over. And so this building is literally like, it's a minaret and a mosque that's built using the ruins of like a Hindu temple. And so it's this kind of mixture of these different religions and symbolic of the Islamic conquest of at least northern, what we think of as India today. And then you're going to see other states like the Song Dynasty and China kind of forever that are using their state religion to create unity and to create progress and innovation. So the Song Dynasty really re-emphasizes Confucianism. They're going to add in some elements of outside religions like Buddhism and create Neo-Confucianism. These are a bunch of scholars taking the Confucian exams, right? Because they have this really intricate bureaucracy where you basically have to be a member of this scholar gentry. You have to have tested into this Confucian elite to be any part of the government. And so you should be noticing different strategies and different ways that states use belief systems. Sometimes it's through kind of conquest and intimidation. Sometimes it's for unity. Dar al-Islam is another great example, using Islam to kind of unite that world together. Another question you're going to want to be able to answer is how did states promote innovation and exchange? And what you're really going to look at here is like cities. Where are there these really powerful cities where there's a lot of different diverse groups coming together and sharing ideas? The two best examples are in this picture over on the left, the Song Dynasty was incredibly urban. They had these massive cities, some of over 1 million people, that brought together people from all over really the Asian world. The Song Dynasty is going to eliminate curfews. They're going to say you can stay out as late as you want, which is going to lead to people exploring the city, meeting new types of people. And they're going to really encourage innovation through education. On the far right, this is a picture from the House of Wisdom in Baghdad. I'm going to do a deep dive on the House of Wisdom in I think my next video, but that's it. Baghdad is another great example of a really diverse cosmopolitan city where the Islamic leaders, the Abbasid caliphs, are like directly funding scholarship. They're going and visiting the scholars and sitting and having these like Socratic seminars about ancient Indian, Greek, Roman writings, and really encouraging a lot of new discovery in math and science as well. Another state that's really good at this are the Inca. So you're going to want to notice when we talk about the American states, their innovation is going to look a little bit different. It's mostly going to be focused on like agriculture and interacting with the environment, right? Because their environment is a lot more difficult. You're in the middle of the Andes Mountains. The last question you're going to want to answer within this is how are states benefiting from trade? How are they using their position on major trade routes to gain or maintain more power? So You're going to see states like the Khmer Kingdom. This is Angkor Wat in the ancient capital, Angkor, of the Khmer Kingdom. They were a massive trading city, an agricultural empire that was really where a ton of different cultures come together. Angkor Wat is a great example of like a mix of Buddhist and Hindu architecture. And they really capitalize on the fact the Khmer right here over where Cambodia is, they really capitalize on being able to provide, they're kind of like the breadbasket for East Asia, right? And Southeast Asia. You're also going to see, if you go over to the far right, these other Southeast Asian kingdoms really capitalizing on being in the middle of this trade between basically the Islamic Middle East, the South Asian Indian continent, and China, right? If you're in between any of those, you're golden if you can just get on some sort of port city and like charge people a lot of money to pass through it. Lastly, we're going to see the rise of some really powerful African trading kingdoms. The most famous is Mali. This is Mansa Musa, who is still, in theory, the wealthiest man in all of world history, as far as we can tell. They really capitalize on being on top of these Saharan trade routes. And so they're really kind of like the door or the gateway to sub-Saharan Africa for Europeans who are coming out of the Dark Middle Ages, for the Islamic world who want that gold, salt, and they want enslaved people to kind of trade across the Indian Ocean world. Okay, so those are the big main things. Again, remember, your guiding question is just, how did these states gain and maintain power? Now, one tip before I go is that if I were you and I were taking notes on my textbook, I would use the spice tea themes of the class to organize your notes. So if you're not familiar, the AP World History class has 6 major themes that can be really helpful for like organizing your thoughts when you have a unit like this that's just like, oh my God, it's like a grab bag of a bunch of different civilizations. Essentially, this stands for society, politics, interaction with the environment, culture, economy, and technology. I have a more in-depth explanation and a blank template of a spice tea chart up on my website for free at antisocialstudies.org. So what I would suggest is that as you're taking notes, take them in this sort of format. Have a spice tea chart for the Song dynasty in East Asia. And then as you learn about things, as you learn about how their political system works, just put it in the table under politics. Because again, chronology in this unit doesn't matter as much as being able to put civilizations next to each other and compare them. And so if you take notes this way, really just in this unit, for the most part, this isn't necessarily always the best way to take notes, but for unit 1, it can be really helpful to just be able to like get everything on one page and go, okay, I can make some sort of direct comparisons, and I have like each of these civilizations in a little snapshot. Again, if you're not sure what that might look like, go check out my website, antisocialstudies.org. Okay, till next time, bye.